Alrighty, welcome and thank you for tuning into this session. If you're here to learn about grants management and specifically in the government space, you're in the right spot. My name is Kate Newton. I head up growth activities for OpenGrants, where we make grant funding easy for startups, small businesses, and nonprofits, specifically to discover grant funding and also to connect you with experts to help you apply for grants. But this grant funding space is big and there's a kind of spectrum of activities. Our partner eCivis covers a different space, which we're excited to dive into. We have Merril Oliver here with us, who is the Executive Vice President and Chief Customer Officer at eCivis. Merril, we're super excited to chat with you and would love to start with just you introducing yourself and letting us know, why does eCivis exist? How did the company get started?
Well, thank you, Kate, for inviting me to participate in an interview with you and share knowledge around grants and grants management. I'm always excited to talk about grants. I'm Merril Oliver. I am, as you mentioned, the Executive Vice President and Chief Customer Officer for eCivis. I've been with eCivis for 5 years. Prior to that, I spent many years in state and local government. I'm the former Director of the Maryland Governor's Grants Office, the former Deputy Director of the Office of Management and Budget for the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico. I've also done quite a bit of volunteering within the grants management arena. So I'm the former three-term president of the National Grants Management Association. And I've also worked in local government as well, in an Office of Management and Budget, and also managing grant dollars at the local government level as well. So
that is the right resume, Merril. That is awesome for this conversation. It's like impressive list.
So why does eCivis exist and how did that come about? Well, approximately 20 years ago, well, actually more than 20 years ago now, back in 2000, at the local government level, a number of local government leaders kind of got together and were talking about how difficult it was for them to access grant dollars. They didn't quite know where all the dollars were. And so they kind of came together with some business partners and created eCivis, which then created a team to professionally curate grant opportunities across the government sector. So what governments back then, and actually as they continue today, they are still challenged with identifying funding opportunities that are in alignment with their policy goals and priorities. And so eCivis, over the past 20 years, has refined that. So again, as I mentioned, we have created a database of grant opportunities that are professionally curated within the United States. It tracks the awards and also post-award. So, once you get the money, what do you do with it? How do you track it? How do you look at your community-based results? And so 20 years ago, that was sort of the ecosystem that was evolving, in which eCivis was trying to solve those problems.
Awesome. And yeah, super interesting. And I covered a lot there. Would love to dive into like who specifically we're talking about as the ideal kind of client for eCivis, who's kind of I guess struggled with this the most, and maybe it's changed a bit in the last 20 years.
Yes, as I mentioned, we have evolved. So we address we're purpose built for state and local government, that is our sweet spot. We have a number of former government professionals on our team that really understand the nature of doing business within government, how government operates, how we look at funding streams, and how we can achieve efficiencies. So the entire government space external to the federal government is our sweet spot. They are our customer. And we have evolved from that one solution of finding opportunities, branching out to full life cycle grants management, as well as cost allocation and indirect cost rate calculation software. So we are a SaaS COTS service. So that means we are software as a service, commercial, off the shelf, purpose-built for government by former government leaders. We also have certified grants management specialists on staff, including myself. I am a certified grants management specialist who oversee the development of the product to ensure that all of the federal regulation, state and local regulation is incorporated into the process, design, and flow so that it makes it easier and ensures for our clients that they are in compliance with all of the strings that come attached to executing some of these grant programs.
Okay, and so we're talking, state level, we're talking cities and counties, would that be kind of correct? And then other maybe just government agencies that fall.
Yes, absolutely. So in the state space, we are well positioned. We are state government wide in Arizona, in Rhode Island, in the government of the Virgin Islands, just to name a few. And then we also are sort of multiple state agency wide in several states: Indiana, Kansas, Georgia, California, just to name a few. So we serve more than 1,000 units of government across the country. We're also in local units of government, so cities, counties, municipalities, as you mentioned, and some of them, for example, Los Angeles, their budget alone is equal to or greater than many of our smaller states. So they are operating, yes, they're operating in a very complex environment. And our solution provides a platform that eases that direct line of sight across all of the agencies or within the specific government department over program financials, because I think often what gets lost in translation when you're talking about grants and grants management, because it is a source of funds, typically the main focus remains on the dollars, tracking the dollars. But really, the main focus is and should be the program and the program outcomes, and it should be community-based. What are those dollars doing for the communities, and how are you making a difference in the communities? And the eCivis product gives you that platform. It gives you that, not just the bird's eye view, but it also digs in deep so that you can use multiple performance tracking tools within eCivis so that you can look at, well, in this particular city, have you reduced juvenile recidivism? And the dollars that were spent on some health programs, did that have an overall impact? Did asthma, for instance, childhood asthma, did you see reduced number of cases in the city? And of course, as we are seeing now with COVID, um, how did that money impact the community? How did it reduce the number of cases? How many people received their vaccines? How many hospitals received the appropriate amount of equipment so that they could meet the community need?
Right. It's bringing it back to those original goals, which of course feels so intuitive that that's what we would be focusing on. But when you get into all the nitty gritty kind of bureaucracy of it, might not be very easy for any particular, agency to do. I'd love to see, what the process is from start. So let's say, I'm a city, what kind of problems are popping up where I'm looking for someone like eCivis and I'm starting to engage with eCivis? And then what are your first steps in kind of evaluating, what specifically you're going to be helping with?
Yes, absolutely. So typically, most government agencies and units of government, when they are receiving their grant dollars and they're tracking their grant dollars, it's typically done in spreadsheets.
Right.
And so we know that alone, while it seems to be automated, it's not. It puts us at risk of audit findings just around error. So, the federal government and even a lot of the foundation funds now, because they're leveraging, all these dollars are being leveraged with each other, they are tracking waste, fraud, error, and abuse. And they're tracking the program outcome. So that becomes very difficult when you're trying to track this kind of information across government functional areas, as well as different government program areas. So we are designed to come in and alleviate all of those processes. So it's standardized. It's standardized across the programs. It's standardized across the departments within that unit of government, or it is standardized within that specific department. And what that allows you to do, of course, is become more cognizant and compliant of executing based on your policy goal, your government's policy goals and priorities. And many of our customers, on average, are experiencing a 20% increase in effectiveness, or what you could say is you could translate that into 20% of efficiencies. You can calculate that as a cost savings, or you can actually allocate that 20% and redirect it to other program areas, all based on providing an automated format to manage the entire ecosystem. We also have some clients that actually report an 83% increase in productivity, which also calculates to a cost savings and efficiency savings. So again, it all comes down to not just tracking your finances. It really is about tracking what are you doing with those dollars and how it's benefiting your communities, and then how are you reporting that up to your funders, and how are you reporting it out to the community. And the eCivis product provides a one-stop shop to address all of that within the system. So you can generate reports that are community or citizen-centric, if you will. You can look at, what has been occurring at that community level, whether it is the state providing funding for the different localities within the state, and the impact that those localities are able to create, or right down at that micro level, in the community, as I had mentioned earlier, what's going on with health issues, what's going on with education, and how that grant money has been utilized to make a positive difference.
Right, because if you don't have that data, making decisions about what programs to fund in the future is not, it's not really based on science at that point. You could say something might look really good on paper, we spent $2 million on education in this space, and those seemed like the right organizations, but if you didn't track the output of that, then you're kind of
Yes,
guessing,
yes,
which completely
yes,
makes sense. And I think something
yes.
you mentioned earlier really struck home with me. Before I worked with OpenGrants, I worked in Silicon Valley for a while, mainly with tech startups, and not so much with government. And now that I'm interfacing more with government, that the idea that it's being deployed on a spreadsheet and that we're using, maybe an Excel sheet to track where something's going, and you're thinking that's not a good enough tool. We're using kind of maybe some outdated, software to really be able to look at this data. And so that really hit home with me. Do you find that that's one of the primary challenges that you see, like the main challenges that agencies are just don't have the tools to make these decisions, or is there another kind of
Yes.
primary one you see?
Yes. Well, I would say it's a combination of they don't always have access to the tools, and they don't have capacity. So
Mhm.
governments operate on budgets that are very trim. Um, and they don't have unlimited resources, and and I think we experienced that through the pandemic, that governments did step up, but it was a very painful process for them because of the capacity constraints that have kind of occurred over time, with investments going into government, and the decisions that they are having to make. And what an automated tool can do for you, especially in what I love about grants, is that it gives you that big bird's eye view of what actually is going on within that unit of government. What is the context in which it is having to operate, and how can you help them tell the story of what they are doing with their dollars? It's not just about compliance. I will say that all of the compliance requirements are built in to the eCivis system. We go through great pains. We have, as I mentioned, certified grants management specialists on staff that actually walk through all of the task pages to ensure that they are in alignment with all of the compliance requirements. But we want to help governments tell their story. And so it's not just about, we spent $20 million on fixing a problem. We spent $20 million on building this bridge. It's telling the story of, we invested, because we're getting some infrastructure money coming out now. We invested in our roads and bridges infrastructure, and what it has done is decrease our citizens' burden in their commute. It's decreased commute times. It's increased the flow of the economy, because the roads are moving more quickly and
Right.
more efficiently. So
Yeah.
it is really expanding your thought process on looking at the policy goals and priorities of each unit of government, and they can track all of that within the system.
Yeah, the goal is not the bridge. The goal is the easier commuting and travel time of people. Yeah, completely makes sense. Is there a favorite example that you like to tell, like a specific story that, you all have been involved in?
Uh, there's many. I think uh, the libraries. Uh, Using libraries as in Arizona, for example, there's a program where they were using libraries to as a multi-purpose facility to meet community needs. Some of the at-risk population were able to hold their meetings there. Other services were being provided through the library. So it wasn't just about providing traditional library services, which they were receiving funding for, but it was also leveraging, how are we going to use this for the benefit of the community, and really being very creative in what you're doing, because governments are looking for money all of the time, and funders want you to be competitive, and they're expecting you to be creative. So that tells us, so you're tracking where the dollars are going, you're tracking outcomes, so that that community library that was being used to do health education in that immediate vicinity, they were noticing that more people were going to their doctor, and they're seeing less ER visits and those kinds of things. So I think grants across the entire spectrum, because they hit on so many areas of need. That's what's so exciting to be in the grants arena. And all communities have needs. They may be different in different parts of the country. They may be measured differently based on how that particular region looks at their particular issue. But in this automated system, all of that is tracked, your outcomes, your outputs as well, because we want to tie outputs to outcomes, which is very critical for a funding agency, and it increases the recipient's competitive value when they're going after grant dollars. It also creates an environment where you are tracking your expenditures, your financials, in a compliant way, which also increases your competitive value. So when you apply for a grant, you can tell your funding agency or your funder that not only do we have a team, an efficient team working on program delivery, but we utilize an automated system that tracks the program, it tracks the financials, it ties it back to policy goals and priorities. You can generate the reports that are important to citizens, your legislature, and so on, your government leaders. So that's what's so exciting. And
Yeah, no, that's excellent. And I mean, you've really touched on how this type of technology can transform, this entire process. Where do you see this evolving in the next, 5 or 10 years? Is there a way you see this, going even further, or maybe just becoming more common?
I think, well, we're already seeing that it is becoming more common, and I do believe we will get to a point that units of government will not only be utilizing an eCivis product, an automated grants management system product, but they'll be able to better communicate with each other, which we're already providing that platform. So when those funds are flowed from the federal government down to state government, and then out into the local jurisdictions and the communities, it provides that communication platform already. And, I think at a certain point, we will probably see all the tiers of government not just communicating vertically,
Mhm.
but we'll be able to see them communicating horizontally and working more collaboratively together across the entire country to achieve a lot of these policy goals and priorities. And we know that not all areas of the country have the same policy goals and priorities, but there are so many similarities about driving the needs for citizens, elevating that up and addressing those needs.
Yeah, absolutely. You can look at, not only what might benefit my community, but, what worked for this community similar to mine in different part of the country and kind of learn from other
Absolutely,
people's triumphs and
absolutely,
mistakes. So,
absolutely. And we do, actually, we have within our pre-award product, we've already started that by pulling down previously funded applications, successful applications, into the product so that folks that are applying for the same grant program, if it's a repetitive grant program, they're able to use that previously funded application for modeling purposes. We're starting to see this emergence of cross collaboration across the entire country, and that's what's really exciting. We won't see so much silo within governments. We'll see that community collaboration, and of course, who's benefiting? It's our citizens and our constituents that are really benefiting, because after all, it's their taxpayer dollars.
right. Yeah.
With federally funded programs and even state and local government funded programs, we see more, and we work more with the federally funded programs that are flowing down. But yes, I mean, it's incumbent upon units of government to ensure that their taxpayers, their federal income taxpayers, are receiving the highest rate of return that they possibly can. And one of the few ways to do that is to increase the amount of federal grant dollars coming into that community.
Right. Everyone has a vested interest in that type of
Yes, yes,
collaboration.
yes.
Um, this has been great. I have a couple more for you. One question I love to ask, just especially I think in the government space, are there any myths that you hear a lot about government funding or this space that you want to debunk?
Yes. Um, Often grants, people tend to think of it as free money. It is
Right.
not free money. The grants by nature are financial assistance for the purpose of meeting public good. And so my advice always to units of government at all the tiers is to look at, when you're going after these grant dollars, are you tying back that grant program to your policy goals and priorities? Because if you're not, you probably won't be successful executing that grant program. But if you are, you can really make a significant positive impact for your community. And using eCivis, you can measure it, you can issue the reports, you can put out publication ready charts and graphs that really demonstrate how you're making a difference for your community.
Yeah, that's a good one. We hear the free money one a lot as well, and that's
Yeah,
definitely one to debunk.
it is
Yeah.
not free money. Yeah, it's a lot of work really does go
Yeah.
into executing grant programs, and you really have to go through sort of a SWOT analysis.
Right.
Are you ready, and are you capable of executing a grant program and driving positive, direct, measurable results? for your community when you are accepting that award.
Yeah, certainly a lot of benefits and pros to grant funding, and just not
Yes.
free. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that's right.
Yeah. No, love that. Would love to ask just what calls you to this work? What's your favorite part of your job?
Um, well, my favorite part of the job is just talking to everyone about what's going on in their community, how grants are making a difference, how you're measuring it. You know, I fell into this work by accident. Um, uh, well, gosh, more than 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And I got so excited about it,
Yeah.
I stuck with it. You know, I had a conversation with a governor once, and he said, you know, Merril, grants are so boring. Like, no, governor,
No, they're
not
not.
at
Yeah.
all. And, you know, for government budgets, especially at the state government level, we're seeing that federal grant dollars account for anywhere between 30 and 60% of the overall budget. But
Wow.
yes, but it's all community. It's driving impact for the community, and that's what I really like. And when you walk outside your door, you look at your trash removal. Well, there's EPA grants that help with that, and there are, you know, for your roads, it's transportation dollars. You know, when you see work on a bridge, quite often that's funded with grant dollars.
Yeah.
So you see it
It's all
everywhere.
over. Yeah.
It is, and that's what's so exciting. So you sort of become a jack of all trades, and interested in just about every topic area within your community.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Meryl. I really learned a lot from you answering these questions and enjoyed our conversation. I think we covered a lot. Is there anything that we didn't touch on that you wanna talk about here?
Well, I would just invite everyone who's viewing this to look at what grants are funding within their own community
Mm.
and see where they might be of help, and reaching out to support our government workforce. And a big shout out to our government workforce. I'm a former government employee myself. Thank you for your service.
Yeah, it's a big job.
It
For
is.
sure. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for chatting with me. For those tuning in, we'll have some helpful links, below here, and definitely a way to go learn more about eCivis. But thank you, Meryl, for chatting with me today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Kate.